Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, this is a summer of heat. Whether it's hot in your area or not, it is hot in America, and it is a very perilous time. One of the most important times that I have experienced in my life. And I want help making sense of it. And this week, especially, I wanted to reach out to a conscience for our nation, a guy who understands the soul of America and is very good at predicting what happens next, and just has a humility and honesty about all things that seems to be lacking in the national conversation. Our friend, a six-time returning champion, the great and powerful Sebastian Junger, is back. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So I was saying I was trying to fix the lighting, but it ain't going to help me. No matter what I do, I ain't going to be as pretty as Pete Hegseth.
No, that's right. And yeah, I was looking at him the other day. He was sitting with Trump and Melania watching the birthday parade, and Trump really, I mean, you can't read too much into expressions, but Trump really looked like he was not in a happy place during that parade. He looked pretty furious. Melania looked unbelievably bored, right? And then Hegseth, I was looking at him, I was like, what is it about that dude? Like, and he reminds me of something. I finally realized he looks a little like a crocodile. He's like a really, really handsome crocodile, right? There's something about his face that squishes down a little bit. I'm like, he's one handsome dude, but he's a handsome crocodile. And then once I thought of that, I felt better for the rest of the day.
Well, I'm hoping you'll help us have a lot of little gems that will help us feel better for the rest of the day. I mean, Trump was probably pissed in part because directly across from him were empty seats, lots of empty seats.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to tell me Hegseth looks like the devil because he feels more and more like that by the day. Dude, there's so much to get into, and you are such a master of kind of ripping apart, especially the civil military divide. But let's just start. All this shit is happening.
Yeah.
Where are you, and how the hell are you, man?
Well, I'm in New York. I got two little girls, 8 and 5. The future of the country and the planet is enormously important to me. And I'm doing what I can. I hate what's happening, but I don't feel it's. I have some very upset liberal friends who are like the sky is falling. I'm like, you know what? Let's not use up that sentence until it is falling,
Mm.
right? Like, I don't like what's going on, but let's sort of keep our powder dry a bit for what really could be violation of our core constitutional rights. Like, let's save those bullets for that situation. And yeah, I'm very heartened to see Trump in a bad mood because it means his plan's not going right. I love it that there are the three conservatives that he appointed to the Supreme Court are the ones who have voted against him on crucial issues, right? I mean, all of that is the immune system of the nation sort of saving itself and fighting off this pathogen.
I want to ask you more about that because I'm not sure if our immune system can defeat this pathogen. And I want to dig in that. But let me go back to something else I think is really important. You've got two little girls. It was Father's Day. It was kind of a weird Father's Day, I think, just because there was so much shit happening. And the day before was Saturday when we had the protest nationwide. We had the
Yeah.
parade happening, the parade charade, and we had political assassinations. So I don't know about you, but I was like, okay, I'm putting on my dad hat, and we got Little League, but there also might be war with Iran and a nuke strike. Like,
Yeah.
how do you sort through that, and how did you think about that weekend in particular? As I think you have a wisdom that I have talked about with you before. As an older dad, you're not a young guy. You
Right.
like me had kids later in life. What was that like for you? What were you thinking?
Well, I mean, my children are my everything in my life right now. I mean, there's just and my wife, of course. And so, but my wife said, Barbara said that we have a friend, a very close friend, just had a serious surgery, and he just is not in a great place. And he said, listen, you should take a trip with him, right? Like you guys need to spend some time together. And so she sort of kicked me out of the house to go spend a weekend with this friend of I won't name him, but this friend of ours, and he needed it, I needed it. It was great, and she had the girls for the weekend. So we actually didn't celebrate Father's Day, except that two dead dads went off to smoke a couple of cigarettes and talk about their problems. Now that's a Father's Day.
But that's good, man. I mean, I think I want to build on that because I think there's a lot of stress, especially among everyone. But men have a harder time talking about their stress and talking about their burdens and their emotions. And you have, you and I have been friends now, I don't know, 20 years. Like we've been on parallel tracks and seen a lot of shit. You've been through a lot of trauma. You've lost friends. You've been to combat. You almost died. Um, can you talk about that? Your book, Tribe, was such a great exploration of how people connect. But can you talk about your thoughts on that need to connect and whether it's happening enough in our society right now, especially for men who, if they don't get it out, it can come out in bad ways, like political assassinations and riots and crazy shit we've seen around the world?
Well, those people are mentally ill, and I'm like, there's this other male issue in society. I think it's worth discussing. I think violent rhetoric on the part of our political leaders actually brings those people out from under their rocks, right? So I think that's actually the problem with that violence. But so what I would say is that men they're really interesting. They create coalitions very easily. You get groups of 5, 6 men, 10 men doing things like very they do that quite naturally, and those coalitions are one of the things that happens when they're in a group is that they actually don't talk about personal stuff because the group is a refuge from the torments of one's psyche, right?
Mhm.
Now you might track down a one male friend and say, "Listen, man, my marriage is on the rocks. Can we talk? I don't know what to do." Men do that with each other all the time, as needed, right? And if a friend of mine was going through a divorce, I would never say, "How's the divorce going?" I'd wait for him to bring it up. If he just wanted to shoot pool, that's all we would do, right? It's up to him. But when you get groups of guys together, they're there for the express purpose. In the old days, express purpose of hunting and defense, right? That's the original point
Mhm.
of the male coalition, as it's called by anthropologists. But in a modern context, it's like, okay, this is where I go to actually not think about all this painful, complicated stuff. And I need that, and I recharge. It's like parking your battery powered car at the charging station. I need this for half an hour. And I walked 400 miles on railroad lines as such a high speed vagrancy with a couple of combat vets and another guy, and from Washington D.C. to Philly to Pittsburgh, right? Sleeping under bridges, etc. I've told all about this, right? And in 400 miles, two of us were getting divorced. I was one of them. Two out of four were getting divorced. No one brought it up. No one asked. No one mentioned it. We walked all the way to Pittsburgh. And it's not that we didn't care about our divorces. It's not that we weren't in pain about it. But this was the refuge from that stuff that we were going to be going back home to when the trip was over.
Mm, mm. For folks that are watching on YouTube, they can see the poster over your shoulder of The Last Patrol.
Oh, yeah.
Was about that, right? And it was on
Yep.
HBO, and I recommend that. I recommend all of Sebastian's great work, everything from Restrepo to Tribe. But Sebastian, we men often come together around like a thing, right? Like it's a ball game, most likely, right? It used to be drinking, right? And I think maybe what I also wanted to ask you to build on is you're right. It is the people who are mentally ill that often go in that direction, but a lot of men are hurting themselves, right? And we see a suicide rate, we see depression, we see isolation, we see people pulling away from their families, from society. That's something you've talked a lot about and
Yeah.
explored, not just with combat vets, but I think you've also given other people permission to talk about that. And I think that's part of what Trump is able to
Yeah.
manipulate is that grievance, that need to be more of a man. I've been thinking a lot about how so many of the people that follow Trump and love this Hegseth shit are the people who would have joined the military, but right?
Right.
It's almost like an aspirational hero
Yeah.
culture to them, which is at a time when so few of us actually have served. But can you pull that apart a bit and what you think about that on the macro, but also this moment where it feels like there's a lot of weight crushing down on people in this country?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, universally in the world, the traditional male role is to fight and defend the community if needed, right? And which isn't to say that women don't belong in our military, but it's sort of a matter of anthropology. Like that's the male role. Firemen, fire stations are almost exclusively male. the work that kills people regularly, almost exclusively male. Roofing crews, logging, whatever, almost exclusively male. Society depends on men to do those things, and it doesn't matter in reproductive terms. It doesn't matter if men get killed because they have almost no reproductive value, right? Like you can kill half the male population, the other half is going to have their work cut out for them, but within a generation, right, the population will be at the exact same level. Kill half the women in a society, it will never recover,
Mm.
right? So that's the male role, and they also do this male coalition thing very, very well, and they love hierarchies, right? And hierarchies work when you're, in a sort of coordinated tactical situation. So a friend of mine was, a woman friend of mine was sort of complaining, a woman friend of mine who may not have been my wife, she was complaining that men don't plan ahead at all. It's like, because I'd forgotten to pack the lunchbox in the backpack, whatever, like
Mm.
you've been there, right? And
Mm.
they don't plan ahead at all. And I was like, I know we don't. Then I was like, we actually plan ahead really well when we're killing things, right?
Mm.
Have you ever seen guys plan on a deer hunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a
That's true.
combat patrol? I mean, to the last detail. So there you see as this sort of fossil remnant of these archaic roles that I think are often rooted in biology, right? You see that in modern society, even in this form. But so, what are you going to do if you're a sort of like low wage earning man in a modern industrial society with a huge uh, income gap between rich and poor? Uh, and there really aren't any situations of actual physical threat where you could actually step into what everyone knows is a quote traditional male role. Like you're sort of deprived of your moment, right? And the firemen, the cops, they take care of that shit, right? And like, so when there's an opportunity to perform that role rather than actually act that role, how often are you going to walk down the street and there's a house fire and a kid dangling from a balcony so that you can run up the gutter and save him? Almost never. I mean, if you're lucky, maybe, but almost never. So what do? You have to perform it, right? And my heart goes out to those guys because it's very, very painful to
Mm.
think, wow, I think I would be a hero, but I will never find out.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's, but then it crosses over into this sort of toxic place where the way they show that they're a hero is by tattooing M4s all over their body like Hegseth does. I mean, at that point, you're like, you're a child, right? That's child stuff. That's not real. That's not manhood. That's not anything. It's not adulthood. Like you're performing at something.
I want to stay on this because I think it's one of the most important conversations not really happening in America. I've talked to Scott Galloway's been on and he talks about it a bit. Wes Moore, a friend, the governor of Maryland, has now launched an initiative focused on men and boys. I've recommended a lot of people check out Richard Reeves' work. I hope he'll join me on the show. But let me ask you a really straight up question because you think about this, you study this, you write about this. Right now in America, who's raising our boys? A lot of folks aren't going to church or where they used to go. They're not joining the military. Less and less men are involved in sports. I know that I and others in our community try to take an active role to be positive role models for all children, but especially the boys. When you look at it, Sebastian,
Yeah.
who the hell? I mean, now you got kids who've been living for 10 years of their life under Trump, right? My child's
Yeah.
entire childhood, my older boy, has been Trump. Who the fuck is raising America's boys?
Well, in every society, communities have always raised children, right? I mean, it's a communal endeavor because humans have always existed in pretty small communities, and the children are running between the huts, and dipping into everyone's stew pot, right? I mean, it's just
Right.
that's it, right? So now in a sort of modern industrial society, community is less and less part of all of our experience, right? And so yeah, men are sort of lonely, et cetera, et cetera. One of the reasons they're lonely is that none of us really have community. Women, right, they are actually more focused on creating community, which is creates a liability. I mean, and so through social media, particularly young women are particularly vulnerable to feeling inferior, inadequate, judged, etc., and being depressed and anxious and even suicidal. And it's because of their sort of affiliative, like community-oriented default setting that they're vulnerable to that. So the men, like, because they're not as social as women, they're not as verbal, they're not as social, they're maybe a little less prone to the dangers that come with sociability, right?
Mhm.
But back to your question, um, who's raising our kids, right? Our boys and our girls. Well, it's not the community. Kids can't even play in their front lawn because everyone's terrified, right? Um, Most of the child rearing in America, rightly or wrongly, uh, it's not evenly divided between men and women. I don't know what it is, 2/3, 1/3, something like. So you're more likely to be substantially raised by your mother, particularly as an infant and a young child, right? And then the statistics are overwhelming for elementary school teachers, overwhelmingly female, right? Which is great. I mean, there are skills that come with gender, and one of the skills of sort of decoding the human expression and how a person's feeling just at a glance. I mean, sometimes guys fail that test completely, right? Like with their
Mm.
girlfriend. Like women are really good at it. So that sort of makes sense. But there's also a real women don't necessarily understand everything that boys need because boys need to imitate men. And if they're not around for one reason or another, there's a big hole there, and they'll fill it with, potentially fill it with macho posturing.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting. This morning I took my son's third grade class to their field day, right? And watching all of this unfold, right? And I think a lot about how there are almost no male teachers. If they're there, they're gym teachers, right? Or they're a para, they're some kind of specialist. You see very few male teachers, and I think that's important because men do need role models. They do need to understand that they can be teachers and educators. But I feel like in my generation a bit, and maybe your generation, the default was like maybe you got raised by television.
Yeah.
Now, what I worry, and I saw this walking with, so you got some kids who have the parents involved, they have some other mentor role model. A lot of them are being raised by the internet.
Oh, totally.
And
Yep.
and that is fucking terrifying because it's beyond the Wild West. And we see the radicalization, we see the isolation, we see the programming, and I'm seeing that. I can tell you which kids in my son's class are just on the internet too much, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just it feels like they're hooked up to the machine, right?
Oh, totally.
So
Yep.
can you talk about, Sebastian, this moment, right? Where it feels like a breaking point for America, but at least for our norms. And specifically, I just want to ask you to break down Los Angeles. You spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. You know this country. You know the National Guard. You know the Marines. You know the PD. I mean, you've been around and you have friends in all these places, but you understand them in a way
Yeah.
that I don't think most folks talking about these things do. And I view you as a public intellectual, someone a thought leader who can help us understand it. Just LA, what are you thinking about LA, and what do you think people need to be thinking about LA?
Well, I think the protests in LA were about um, the enforcement of immigration laws, right? And they were rounding up people who, I mean, just to take our own laws at face value, literally, who were not here legally, right? These are bipartisan laws, and Trump decided to enforce them and enforce them in quite a cruel way, right? So what do we do? I think Trump wanted to find out that he could demonstrate his immense power, right, by crushing protests in a liberal city, right? And what we found out, um, and what I hope is that there's a real conversation about a sort of amnesty program where illegal migrants who are working and have not broken the law and are acting in good faith can maybe get work permits so that they'll pay taxes and aren't worried about being people. I mean, that would be an adult conversation for a nation to have, right? But I think what we found out with this, I think Trump badly, badly erred in this tactic, right? The polling sucks for him on the use of military, particularly Marines, with all of the honor of their service behind them being dumped in the streets of LA and basically having nothing to do, right? Like the public polling on that was not good for Trump. But more sort of like strategically for the oppositional left, which I'm part of. I mean, I'll just say that is that Pete Hegseth told us that the dollar cost of one weekend of not that many soldiers, Marines, in National Guard in Los Angeles was $150 million, right? So it didn't take me long to think, wow, if we really wanted to throw a wrench in this, if Trump crossed some kind of basic line, no habeas corpus for U.S. citizens, right? No, whatever the list, all the list of our core rights, if any of that gets touched, but wow, mass protests in 40 cities, not Trump is helpless. 150 million a pop in 40 cities, right? Like the federal government and the military reserves could not handle that. And now we know because we didn't know the cost.
Mm.
Now we know, like, oh, crosses a real red line where everyone, even like MAGA, like no, you can't just throw someone in jail and not give them a trial. You cannot do that in this country. And if that starts to happen, 40 cities for 40 days. You know what I mean? Like it's like that.
I want to drill down on that because I think he is doing it. He doesn't care what the courts say. He doesn't care about poll numbers. He doesn't care about what the judges are going to rule. And I think in many ways, he's still chugging along. Yeah, Hegseth has got fuck ups. Yeah, the parade wasn't great, but strategically, he's moving forward in his objectives. And one of them was to find a test case where he could deploy the National Guard and federalize them. He could send the Marines in. And with all due respect, like America's not that pissed off about it,
Right.
right? They're still there. There's not mass protest
Right.
against this glass breaking, shattering of norms that's happening. And I feel like the danger here is he's kind of lulling us into it. And then comes Chicago, and then comes New York, right? A couple other cities. And you just have the National Guard out there in the back, right? Like, and it feels like they're doing checkpoints on 9/11 at the bridges and tunnels.
Well, no, but the thing is, I mean, look, I'm fully sympathetic to the cause of undocumented migrants and protecting their basic human dignity, right? Like, don't get me
Of
wrong,
course,
right?
yeah.
But if you're going to ask the public to a mass mobilization by the right-minded public to stop fascism in the streets of America, it's not going to be over an issue where like the law is the law and they're breaking it, right? Don't do it over immigration, right? I mean, do it over someone arresting Paul Rieckhoff and throwing him in prison because we've had enough of your mouth, sir. You're going away for a while, right? Like, do it over that. I mean, that's a core constitutional right, which the issues in LA with immigration, frankly, are not, right? I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like you really want to pick your moment for this, and it's got to be where an absolute red line that separates democracies from non-democracies, where that red line has been crossed. France is perfectly capable of rounding up undocumented migrants and shipping them out. So is England. So is every country in Europe. That's not the red line that we need to. And when you cross that red line, I'm quite sure that the American public will be like, we're opposing this until it stops. We're going nowhere, right? And I think, among other things, they could just bankrupt the Trump administration by just doing it everywhere at once for as long as we need
So
to.
are we missing? Are we missing a Navalny moment? Is that what it is? I mean, right, we've got this moment where I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. And I think some people are upset about what ICE is doing, operating in masks, rolling in and taking people out without due process, right? But he threatened to put um, Governor Newsom in jail. He's threatened to put, Senator Padilla got roughed up last week, right? I mean, Speaker Johnson said he wants Gavin Newsom tarred and feathered. So are we like a Navalny moment away from having that person put in jail, where that person becomes a rally point for people to come out of the woodwork and say, all right, that's enough. You can do all this other shit, but you can't put a governor in jail.
Right. And there's free speech in this country. I can say I think Trump should be in jail. Right. I have the right to say that. Trump can say I should be in jail. I mean, we all have the right to say those things. It's irresponsible for a president to say it. I got you, right? We're on the same page. But if you
Yeah,
just want to look at the law, right, that's free speech. Like,
yeah.
sorry, right? And that should get him booted from office by Republicans in Congress. But it's not. So, like, but it's not a Navalny moment. Navalny was poisoned, almost died from the poison, thrown in jail, and essentially killed in jail, right? When that happens, it's a Navalny moment. But don't sell Navalny short by saying, oh, this, the threat to tar and feather governor, it's not. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but, they have to cross that line. They have to do it. They have to do it. And
Mhm.
when they do it, I hope this nation is out on the streets like immediately in mass numbers and does not go away. And I think they will be. There's boycotts, there's strikes, walkouts, boycotting goods. I mean, you could cripple this country really quickly, and it's a very effective tool against fascism. Is just a boycott, right? I mean, you just don't
Mm,
buy stuff for a week. I
mm,
mean, regimes don't survive long without oxygen. I'll put it that way.
mm. Okay, so where does this go? Like, and I'll ask you to also maybe touch, if you can, on, you have a very deep understanding of the civil military divide. Trump gave this, awful speech at Fort Bragg that crossed all the lines. He did the parade. And I also think there's another part that I've been watching on LA and trying to bring attention to. There's no area commander giving everybody a daily update. Right? It'd be nice to see,
But
here is National Guard commander, whoever, Marine Corps commander, whoever is designated as the head of this area of operations to give you a daily update. Today, we arrested 25 people. Today,
right,
we did this. Here's the general state. Curfew's on, curfew's off, like they did in Iraq and so many other places, right? So
right.
that breakdown has happened intentionally, in my view. But where do you think this goes, man? Like where do you think we are in a couple of months from now? If is he going to slowly push this out? Is he going to pull back? The military is now become a political chew toy in a way we've never seen. Where do you think we go from here?
Well, I mean, I've argued with my friends over this. I don't, I think, I've talked with, I argue with my liberal friends and I talk with my conservative friends. It's very funny. One of my conservative friends is, I mean, my liberal friends are always freaking out, right? And my conservative friends talk to them, and I said, to this one woman who's like a conservative, lifelong Catholic, married to a retired Marine general whose father was in the Marines and lives in the Deep South, right? So check every box, and a
Yeah.
sweetheart and a very, very smart woman and utterly wonderful. And we're friends, right? Like, and so I'll ask her, I'm like, hey, what about that? Because partly I like to needle her, and partly I'm curious, like, well, how is the conservative mind thinking about this stuff, right? And much like the National Review often, she is appalled by the Trump administration, right? Appalled. And Hegseth, oh my God, she can barely speak about him. She's so upset. And what she basically said to me was, listen, tell me what to do. The Democrats need to win in the midterms. She's a hardcore Republican, right? Only the Democrats can save this country. The Republicans won't do it anymore. They need to win in the midterms. What can I do? Does Seth Moulton need advice? Like, she worked at the Pentagon. She knows this
Mhm,
shit, right?
mhm,
She's like, what can I do? I'll be your secret agent. I'm going to whisper. I'll be the
mhm,
Republican whisperer, right? So
mhm,
where does this go? I mean, the trend line is that his poll numbers continue sinking and sort of bottom out at the 33% hardcore molten MAGA, that aren't really making choices about things. They have an identity and they're not thinking about it, right? So it
mhm,
bottoms out there. I think, the clearly the economy is at risk. The polling on not only on Trump himself, but on the issues like immigration, how he handled Los Angeles, terrorists, the polling also sucks for him, like in the 30s, right? So I don't think he can survive like this very long. And so I said to my conservative friend, I don't think Trump has a very strong hand, and I think he knows it.
hmm.
And she was in the Trump administration the first time around, right? And she's like, "No, you're right. He doesn't have a strong hand, and he does know it." And she's like, "I'm just worried he's going to start a nuclear war."
Well, so let me
Yeah,
flip that and say, maybe what if he does have a strong hand? Because everything he's done has not required congressional approval anyway, right? The deployment of the National Guard, the sending in of the Marines, all the other shit he wants to do, deployment of ICE. Congress hasn't stopped him. The Democrats haven't stopped him. If the Democrats held the House right now, I mean, what could they do? They could try to deny funding, but he's still going to do it. So the question is, like, it's like this race, right? Where if he doesn't give a fuck about the midterms and he's just pushing toward how far he can go before he is assumingly defeated at the ballot box, I mean, maybe impeached, maybe he dies. There's all those other scenarios. But I think there's another piece of this that people underestimate. He may just be running till the wheels come off
yeah, I'm
without a
sure.
regard. So if
Yeah.
that's the case, and people are rightfully concerned about a nuke strike with what's happening in Israel and Iran, I mean, he could do a lot of damage, Sebastian, between now and 3 more years, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not saying there's no damage, right? I mean, I got it. I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to have a democracy at the end of this when we survey the smoking ruin of our country, right? And so my point is that, I mean, yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know the specifics of how the government works that well, but Congress does have the power of the purse. if they choose to exercise it, with which the Republicans haven't. And there's some level of opposition where they can override an executive order, right? And so, and the courts have been amazing in stopping him, right? And actually, as much as he says he can ignore the courts, he's not.
But right now, let's use that as an example, just to play devil's advocate here, right?
Yeah,
Court has said they ruled against the National Guard that's supposed to take effect on Tuesday, but they're still there, right? They're still there.
yeah,
And then on Tuesday, there's going to be an appeal. Hegseth has already said
yeah.
national security should not be determined
Right,
by. So we keep reading these crossroad
right.
points, and I think the next crossroad point is when a court says the guard has to leave, and he says no. Then what?
Well, the president does not decide what's legal or illegal. The courts do, and every commander knows they cannot obey an illegal order. So it's up to the
So take that all the way through because this is what I've seen from the left too, right? You've seen it too. People are like send this to all your friends in the military, right? And it's some like GI hotline. You don't have to follow an unlawful order. You guys should all rebel. And there's these protesters to hey, drop your weapons and quit the army. Like you and I know that's not going to happen because what
right,
they haven't been given any unlawful orders.
right.
But understanding that piece, which I think is really important, right? The continuity of the National Guard, the diversity that does still exist. His speech at Fort Bragg, his speech
Yeah.
at West Point. Do you think the military can fray? Do you think generals will speak out? Do you think that folks will break ranks and we'll see what I would argue is not just a constitutional crisis, but a civil military crisis?
I mean, I don't know, but I'm amazed at how resilient it is. I don't think active duty generals should speak out, right? I mean, except in the most appalling circumstances, right? But they should speak with their actions. And yeah, stuff's getting appealed as it should, and blah, blah, blah. The process unfolds. And so maybe it won't be LA, maybe it'll be just Detroit 6 months from now.
Yeah.
But if the court says you cannot deploy the National Guard without being in consultation with the governor, if the courts rule that, the National Guard commander in Michigan or whatever, unless he's a real or she's a real Trump acolyte, right? But I imagine they would say, and their JAGs would say, "Listen, sir, it's an illegal order. Like, do not follow it." Right, and with until the governor gives his approval, and I don't know, but
This is what I'm worried about, right? Because they've hollowed out the JAG Corps. Now you've got the balkanization where, yeah, maybe the California National Guard will say no. But what about the Arkansas National Guard, where Huckabee Sanders is the governor and they're disproportionately Republican and they really
yeah,
love Trump and they say, hey, your president told you to do this. And Hegseth's talking in the ear saying the courts are full of liberal activist judges. Like this is possible, right? It may be
what
unrealistic, but we're seeing the balkanization, whether it's small or large. There is a balkanization that's happening around our military, right?
as long as the Arkansas National Guard doesn't invade Colorado or whatever it borders, like, as long as that doesn't happen, if they want to use the Arkansas National Guard to oppress conservatives in Arkansas, go for it.
But here's what they'll do too. They can send the Arkansas National Guard down to the Texas border, and the Texas governor will let them.
Right. All right, but those are still conservative states violating democratic norms to the detriment of all of their voters, all of their citizens, right? It's like you voted for them, you all want to do this to yourselves, go for it. But do not invade Massachusetts with the Rhode Island National Guard. That will be a fight, sir.
Oh, see, but I mean, we joke, but we know, right? Like I've been in the Florida National Guard. I've been in the New York National
Yeah,
Guard. They are very different. Like I was in a Florida National Guard unit from the Panhandle, and then I was in, a unit in Manhattan, right? Like I've been in different units,
yeah,
and they are very, very different. You know the old saying, if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. I mean, the National Guard is very different around
yeah,
this country, right? But let me ask you, I don't want to lose you without touching on one subject.
yeah,
I love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours. You've been a great supporter of Ukraine, and you joined to help support American Veterans for Ukraine. You've been outspoken about Ukraine. Ukraine is kind of getting put in the rearview mirror for some right now, especially
yeah.
now with Israel and Iran happening. Can you give us just your update on Ukraine? What you think, where you think it is, what you think is important to watch for now and to think about?
God, I mean, I've never been there, and I read the newspaper like everybody else or whatever. That's all I really know. But it feels like it's sort of a marathon. Like which country can survive longest, and the Russian economy is sort of running on fumes, manpower, machinery. It's all kind of running on fumes. The Ukrainians are completely fucking with them, right? And deep in their country, right? And the Russians are slowly, slowly taking over very small bits of territory in Ukraine, right? Will that gather momentum and then suddenly they're in Kyiv? I don't know. I doubt it. But in 3 years, they expanded their control of Ukraine minimally. Like, so what are you talking 20 years war? I mean, they were in Afghanistan for 10 and that didn't work. And that was
Mhm.
Afghanistan, right?
Mhm.
Like, and
Mhm.
I think NATO and the EU, they realize that, Ukraine is their buffer from Russian aggression and they better fund them and help them if they don't want to fight the Russians themselves. So for me, it's not a foregone conclusion that it's a long grinding war that will eventually destroy Ukraine. It could, but I don't think that's at all an assumption we need to make.
Mm. You've generously offered to stick around for a couple extra questions for our Patreon members. To those folks, thank you for making this kind of content possible. Your support gives the oxygen that we need to make this kind of stuff happen. So Sebastian's going to stick around with some exclusive content just for you. Final question for you, man. This week was your Alive Day, I think, right? I have it on my calendar. The day where you almost died.
Yep.
Having gone through that experience, you probably look at everything differently. You've written about it extensively. You've talked about it extensively. But what perspective does it give you now as everybody feels like they're under attack or that everyone is concerned? There's this general aura of stress and anxiety. What does it afford you, whether it's in dealing with these macro issues or just dealing with your kids? I imagine that you might say there are some gifts or advantages that came out of that, but what did it give you that you didn't have before to help you deal with this moment?
I mean, I risk sounding sort of trite and whatever, but if you almost die, I mean, I've been at a couple of close calls in Afghanistan and elsewhere. A momentary trauma, it didn't really deepen me as a person or as a thinker, particularly, right? But almost dying and experiencing the dying process, because I bled out, so I got right to the edge of the precipice. I remember what it felt like, and I came back, and it has given me, in some ways, the sort of blessing is that it's very easy for me to stop the clamor in my head and ignore the clamor in the world and just be amazed that I and my children and any of us exists. Just amazed. Like, are you fucking kidding? This happens, right? Like, are you kidding? A bunch of mineral dust has reconfigured itself as a human being and it can think about itself and its children. Like, I feel like, what a freak show, right? And so I'm 63 and I only have 20 whatever years to think what a freak show, but I'm definitely going to think that, right? What a blessed, amazing, gorgeous event this thing is, right? And whoever's freaking president, right? So that I can get there. And then on the other more mundane level, um I will do anything that protects my children from moral or physical harm, anything, right? And if circumstances require that, I will rise to it. And I hope they don't, right? But that's where I'm at as a person. Like I have no longer any interest in myself as a person. I have an interest in myself as a father, and my job is to protect them and my wife. And that's it. And that's that I see politics entirely through that lens.
Whew. You are an amazing, a beautiful, gorgeous human being that gives this to us. I mean, I feel so lucky to have your friendship and your wisdom. America needs to hear that perspective and all of your perspective now more than ever. I've said this to you before. I think you're one of the most important, not just writers, but thinkers and consciences for this country and really for everything happening in the world. And every chance I get to talk to you, I am grateful and thankful. So thank you for giving us and ending on a positive note that people can reflect on and I hope take with them. That's a gift. But you continue to give this country great gifts, man, and you're the best kind of patriot. Thank you for all you do, my friend.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Sebastian Junger for president, folks. There he is. Stay vigilant, my friend.